There is a kind of intelligence that doesn't liberate you. It refines you. It sharpens your language. It makes your inner life feel complex, textured, profound. And quietly, almost politely, it keeps you from doing anything that would actually change your life. In January of 1786, Thomas Jefferson wrote a short, private fragment titled Dialogue Between My Head and My Heart. It was never published, never finished, never revised for an audience. Just a few pages in which two voices argue about how a person ought to live. At first glance, it looks like wisdom. At second glance, it looks like honesty. But if you dig far enough, it begins to look like something else entirely. Not a conflict, but a system. Jefferson was not an author in the ordinary sense. He did not cultivate ambiguity as an art. His public writings aim for resolution. They announce conclusions. They tell you what must be done. This text does the opposite. It refuses closure. It refuses decision. And it does so with unsettling confidence. The dialogue was written while Jefferson was serving as a diplomat in Paris. On paper, a triumph. In reality, a period of emotional erosion. His wife had died 4 years earlier. He never remarried. He was separated from his children and unmoored from familiar life. Loneliness runs through his private writings. Not dramatically, but persistently, like background radiation. This is the mental weather in which the head and the heart begin to speak. The head's position is easy to recognize. It argues for restraint, for caution, for emotional distance. Attachment, it warns, brings suffering. Love exposes you to loss. Desire creates vulnerability. Pain is not an accident. It is a foreseeable consequence. From this perspective, wisdom looks like management. Delay commitment. Choose safer pleasures. Prefer tranquility over intensity. If one source of happiness is denied or dangerous, another may appear later. Life, the head assumes, offers replacements. This logic is not foolish. It is coherent, forward-looking, and, most importantly, protective. But protection always has a cost. The head treats time as though it were generous, as though chances repeat themselves, as though postponement were neutral. It never asks whether a deferred life might quietly become a diminished one. The heart responds, and its argument is more unsettling precisely because it is not sentimental. It does not deny the reality of pain. It does not claim that love is safe. Instead, it attacks the head's deepest assumption, that avoiding suffering should be the highest aim. The heart insists that happiness is not interchangeable. It is not abstract. It is bound to specific people, moments, and circumstances. What is delayed may never return. Time is not a container. It is a sequence of doors that close. From the heart's perspective, restraint is not merely cautious. It is destructive. To avoid pain by avoiding attachment is itself a form of loss, one that cannot be recovered later. A life organized entirely around safety may succeed at minimizing suffering while quietly failing to live. This is where most readers stop and admire the balance. Reason versus feeling. Prudence versus passion. Two legitimate goods in tension. No easy answers. But this reading misses what the dialogue is actually doing. The head and the heart are not simply opposing forces. They are cooperating. Together, they create a closed system in which action is endlessly deferred. The head supplies arguments for safety. The heart supplies arguments for intensity. And Jefferson, by allowing the debate to continue without resolution, gets to experience depth without exposure. He feels the pull of life without committing to it. He understands the stakes without paying them. The dialogue becomes a machine for feeling alive while remaining untouched. This is not neutrality. It is a strategy. Dig deeper, and the voices themselves begin to change shape. The head stops looking like reason in the abstract and starts looking like fear that has learned to speak persuasively. The heart stops looking like courage and starts looking like desire that refuses accountability. Neither voice tells the whole truth, and neither is meant to win, because a victory, for either side, would collapse the system. A decision would end the dialogue, and ending the dialogue would force a life. This is the crucial turn. The dialogue preserves possibility. Decision destroys it. To choose is to close doors, accept consequences, and become answerable. Not to arguments, but to outcomes. The text resists this with remarkable discipline. That resistance is not confusion. It is competence. Jefferson knows exactly what is at stake. He understands the cost of restraint and the cost of attachment. The dialogue's unsettling power comes from its clarity, and yet it ends exactly where it begins, which raises a question the text never asks. What is the value of self-knowledge if it does not demand transformation? At a certain point, recognizing a conflict stops being honest and starts being evasive. The refusal to choose becomes a choice, one that preserves safety at the expense of life. Seen this way, the dialogue is not merely humanizing. It is diagnostic. It shows how intelligence can be used not to clarify action, but to delay it indefinitely. How insight can replace risk. How understanding can become a refuge. This posture extends beyond the personal. Jefferson could articulate universal ideals of liberty while privately maintaining structures of dependence and control. The dialogue does not explain those contradictions away, but it shows how they can coexist, how one can hold opposing truths without forcing a reckoning, provided one never lets thought harden into commitment. The danger here is not hypocrisy. It is comfort. The comfort of believing that seeing clearly is the same as living rightly. This is why the text still matters, because the head and the heart still speak exactly this way. They speak every time we optimize our lives for safety and call it maturity. Every time we substitute analysis for action. Every time we mistake emotional distance for wisdom. The dialogue feels modern because it names the temptation we still obey. The temptation to live in perpetual preparation. And then the text stops. No verdict, no synthesis, just silence. That silence is often read as humility, but it can also be read as something colder. The sound of a decision postponed long enough to become permanent. Once you understand both voices, once you know the cost of restraint and the cost of attachment, and you choose to keep thinking instead of choosing, the question is no longer philosophical. It is personal. If you refuse to risk pain in order to live, and you refuse to risk living in order to stay safe, and you call that balance, what kind of life are you actually choosing? The dialogue never answers, and that may be the most honest thing Jefferson ever wrote. So, let me ask you this. If Jefferson's dialogue is honest, and if the conflict really is permanent, then at what point does understanding become an excuse and wisdom turn into self-betrayal?